Hello, I'm Aluka, a 3D pen creator, and I'll be making Matt foam reboxing. His opponent was originally supposed to be Stewie Griffin, but you can see from the thumbnail, things happened. I also knew I wanted to make a complete boxing ring, and of course Matt needed to win because when does he really lose? I grew up with the Wii, and my favorite game was actually Kirby Epic Yarn, but since Wii Sports came with the console, I spent a lot of time beating my siblings. I actually didn't like boxing much at all, but I recently bought a Wii and boxing has become my favorite. So to celebrate my newfound love for boxing, I'm making Matt the most iconic Wii Sports character. Matt was actually a professional boxer before he quit and became the trainer. There's newspapers talking about his victories if you look close enough. This head ended up being way too large, so I remade it, and to save me from arthritis for a little bit longer, I wrapped the pin around to create the frame. Then, once that was done, I filled it an opposite way. Doing this creates less gaps which I have to fix later. The final, and the longest step is filling it in. You go in circular motions not to miss anything. This can take hours depending on how big your project is, and it's why these are small. There were still some gaps I had to fix, but they weren't big and I fixed them off camera. Once I finished the body, I decided I deserve a cold Diet Coke. I love Diet Coke if you didn't know. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I get. The Diet Coke was so crispy and definitely worth the cleanup. Back to the knees, I filled in the last bit of Matt's face, and this is how it looked. For the shorts part of the shorts, I'll be using a marker wrapped in painter's tape so they can all be the same size. Then I can just take it off, connect both sides, and add them to the body. Once the body was done, it was time for the shoes, and I just freehanded them by making an oval then stacking filament up. The boxing gloves were next, and these were a bit different for me to wrap my head around, so I started with the ball. Then I added the sleeve part and the big thumb piece. And before I smooth them out, more Diet Coke. To smooth them out, I'll be using my Clover mini iron. I did buy a new tool, but unfortunately I didn't figure out how to remove the tips yet. I don't like using the standard soldering iron tip because it dips into the filament for me. This could be a skill issue, but I blame it on being left-handed. Using such a big tool for small projects does result in burns, lots and lots of burns, which is why I bought my new tool, which will hopefully solve this problem. I ended up remaking the boxing gloves. I removed the filament on the palm part, then made the glove part higher to create the hook. I added just a tiny bit of filament back to the palm. After that, I smoothed it out, then added the thumb piece back, and it looks a lot better. Now it is time for sanding, which I did for a little bit until I remembered I have a power tool, so I use that instead. The downside of using that is that it leaves a texture on your 3D model which needs to be hand sanded away, but you need to do that anyway to achieve the smoothest finish. By the time I was done sanding, my hand was actually in pain, and just look at the mess. Before I cleaned it up, I removed the dust with a lighter and ran them under some water to remove anything that's left. I let them dry in this takeout container and I was left with some pretty smooth pieces I hate to ruin later. I did in fact ruin them. Moving on to the boxing ring, which honestly was more annoying than I thought, particularly because I didn't actually plan to make it. I just started to make it and it didn't turn out the best. Not the worst. I started out with a square. I filled the square in with lines, then filled it in with a 3D pin. I only did this once because I figured it would be strong enough to hold it, and I was right and also lazy. Following the walls, I made the corner pieces which holds the ropes together. And for a quick tip when filling in something long, you can use a pencil, in my case a sanding stick, to make it easier. This ensures all the pieces are the same thickness. Then I just had to fill it in and I was done. This was also the last thing I made, so I didn't have to stop recording to make the rest. Now that all the pieces are done, it's time to start putting it together. The bottom ring was fairly simple to make because it's just a square that got smoothed out along the edges. The steps were also easy, but I made them really thin, so I had to be careful not to melt them when connecting them to the ring. This is where the hard parts began. I had to correctly line up all the poles, which was annoying because even though I made them all the same size, the floor had dips in it, so I had to add more filament to level it out. Moving on, I had a genius idea to use the filament as the rope. I just heated it and rolled it. This was incredibly difficult to stick on and took me so long to finish just for one of the ropes to fall into a void, which meant I had to make a new one. This happened multiple times. Everything got primed white and it was time for painting, and the primer ruined the smoothness I worked so hard to achieve. I started with gray because the biggest things are gray, the ring and the shoes. Then I painted the poles red and the gloves, which I forgot to record. Don't get me started on the ropes and how I would mess them up by painting the poles and vice versa. We finally switched to blue for the other shorts and of course the other gloves. I used a beige tan for Stewie's skin color. Matt got painted nutmeg brown and his beard got painted black. And it was time for the eyes, which I assumed would be easy to paint because I am not a painter. Then I realized I didn't own a single micro brush. Matt's face actually didn't turn out so bad and I didn't have to go back and fix much. Stewie, on the other hand, I don't know honestly. I did go back and fix his face and it looks so much better. Took a long time though. To put all the pieces together, I used super glue, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but with the way I made the ropes, this was the only option. I really wanted to put Stewie in the KO position, and that's literally why I made this whole thing. I was looking forward to this moment. I wanted Matt to be floating like the game, so I super glued him to the ropes. The final step was gluing his head turned down, and I was done.